Gaza and the ability for Palestinians to return to their homes there. The statements come as 20 people were killed and more than 150 injured as they waited for aid in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Israel said reports that it was an IDF attack were false and it was thoroughly assessing the incident. Israel has rejected criticism from the US Senate leader Chuck Schumer, who described Benjamin Netanyahu as an obstacle to peace. Mr. Schumer, America's highest-ranking Jewish official, called for new elections to replace the Israeli leader. But Mr. Netanyahu's Likud party said the Prime Minister's policies were supported by a huge majority. The Conservatives have refused to confirm or deny reports that the donor at the centre of a racism row has given more money to the party. Frank Hester has apologised for being rude about the MP Diane Abbott, but said his comments were nothing to do with skin colour. Downing Street called them racist, and opposition parties have said the Tories should return his donations. Here's our political correspondent Ian Watson.
Asked if the Conservatives had accepted further donations from Frank Hester, the party issued a one-line statement that declarable donations would be published by the Electoral Commission in the usual way. Translated, that means they don't want to tell us, at least not now. Mr. Hester gave £10 million to the party last year, but the Electoral Commission won't publish information on any donations made to any political party this year until June. The Tortoise Media website said a hear running at Westminster by suggesting the Conservatives are sitting on a further tranche of cash from Mr. Hester. This hasn't been specifically denied, but party spokespeople wouldn't say anything beyond their short statement. Labour and the Lib Dems have called for any donations to be handed back after Mr. Sunak described Mr. Hester's alleged comments about Diane Abbott as racist and wrong.
Rishi Sunak has ruled out holding the general election on May the 2nd, the same day as local and mayoral elections in England. There had been mounting speculation at Westminster that the Prime Minister was preparing to go to the polls early. He's previously said his working assumption is that the election will be in the second half of the year. The link between health and wealth has been highlighted by a new study which shows the risk of death from alcohol, drugs or suicide is higher in more deprived areas in the north of England and in seaside towns. The rates of death in England were highest in Blackpool, where they were 6 times the rate of the lowest area, Barnet in North London. Here's our health correspondent, Dominic Hughes.
The research group Health Equity North used data from coroner's inquests to look at deaths in England linked to alcohol, drugs or suicide between 2019 and 2021. It found around 46,000 people, nearly 3% of all deaths, had lost their lives this way. Poorer areas in the north and seaside towns have the highest rates. The study suggests having more than one risk factor, living in the north, but also being white, working class, living alone, unemployed, or doing an unskilled job, seems to have a multiplier effect. The researchers say that already existing inequalities in health and wealth have become wider.
The communications watchdog says children are first seeing violent online content while still at primary school and describe it as inevitable and unavoidable. Ofcom is urging social media companies to strengthen child protection on their platforms, ahead of guidance being published this spring. Here's our technology reporter, Shiona McCallum.
A relatively small number of children were questioned for Ofcom's report, but all 247 of them had encountered a range of violence online. This included gaming content, verbal discrimination and videos of fights. A second report found that suicide, self-harm and eating disorder content was also prolific on social media. A third said cyberbullying had a negative impact on children's emotional, mental and physical health. All the children said they wanted tech firms to take responsibility for keeping them safer online. Ofcom said now was the time for the industry to act to ensure it was ready to meet its child protection duties under new online safety laws.
The England and Wales Cricket Board has told parents and clubs to stop using plastic balls distributed to children through 2 youth engagement programmes run by the governing body. There are concerns about some chemicals used to make them. Theo White reports.
Children aged 5 to 11 joining either of the ECB's popular All-Stars or Dynamos cricket programmes were given a free kit bag, a set of stumps and a ball. But safety tests on the ball have shown that the amount of phthalates, a group of chemicals used to increase the durability of plastics, is above approved levels. Exposure to some phthalates have been linked to cancer and reproductive problems, as well as problems with child development. Authorities haven't recommended the balls be recalled, but the ECB says they should be discarded out of an abundance of caution.
A tennis match featuring two of the world's top players has been interrupted by a swarm of bees. Carlos Alcaraz was in the early stage of his contest against Alexander Zverev at Indian Wells in California, when bees buzzed around the cameras and the players. Alcaraz swatted them with his racket and was stung before running off court. A beekeeper was called in to remove the swarm. When the match resumed 2 hours later, the Spaniard showed no ill effects, winning in straight sets.
The most unusual match that I've ever played in my career. I've never seen something like that, so I think I will remember that match because of that. I think everybody will remember this situation, and we found it as a funny thing, that's for sure.
The actor Pierce Brosnan has been fined £400 for trespassing in a restricted area of Yellowstone National Park. The James Bond star had initially pleaded not guilty, but changed his mind when he appeared in court in Wyoming. He was also ordered to make a donation to a local environmental charity. Hikers are not permitted to leave designated trails in the park because of its hot springs and geysers.
Thanks, Caroline. 9 minutes past 7. Frank Hester was a pretty low-profile business person. He founded a software company called the Phoenix Partnership, but he's one of the biggest ever donors to the Conservative Party, having given £10 million in the year to March, and according to news website Tortoise, a further £5 million since. He, of course, said on the Black MP diet.
Is that declarations will be declared in the usual way. They've certainly not denied it. There is a lag between the point at which donations are received and declared, which means that assuming that it is right, what I've been told, that and also assuming that they don't give the money back, that it will appear in the next update, which will be in early June.
Is this a problem with the system that we have to wait? There's a lag time to see donations reported rather than seeing them, well, nearly in real time?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel very old-fashioned, doesn't it? You know, we're so used to things being able to sort of move at pace, you know, digital kind of world that we live in, and AI and things like that. You know, we are still sort of very much in a kind of world of sort of paperwork being filed at a snail's pace, and this is a problem that we've kind of found repeatedly with some of the work that we did last year on the Westminster accounts, and we were looking at MPs' registers individually. Again, that it is all sort of done by hand and is a very kind of archaic, creaking system. In this case, it is updated quarterly. Now, you could argue that that enables the people working in the system to make sure that everything is checked off properly, but it does feel very much a kind of relic of the past century.
It's a colossal amount of money, this. £10 million in 1 year, in the year to March, and then another $5 million. And put that in context for us in campaign finance terms.
Sure. So in 2019, the general election then, the Conservatives spent just over £16 million. So this is very close to their total war chest from 5 years ago. Now, the spending cap has been raised. It is now just under £35 million. So they could still raise quite a lot more if they chose to, but it's certainly setting them well on their way.
Okay. All right, Kat Neelan, politics editor at Tortoise. Thank you very much indeed.
12 minutes past 7. Has the fallout from the Princess of Wales doctoring a family photo resulted in a changed relationship between the royal family and the media? There are signs that it has, at least with international broadcasters and press. Here's Ross Atkins talking to Phil Chetwynd, who's the global news director at AFP, which is one of the best-known news agencies in the world. They were talking on the media show on Radio 4.
You said that Kensington Palace was a trusted source for you at the AFP. Is it still a trusted source?
No, absolutely not. Like with anything, when you're let down by a source, the bar is raised, and we've got, you know, major issues internally as to how we validate that photo. We shouldn't have done. violated our guidelines, and therefore, we send out notes to all our team at the moment to be absolutely more vigilant about the content coming across our desk, even from what we would call trusted sources.
Peter Hunt was listening to that, former BBC Royal correspondent. Morning, Peter.
Good morning.
It's a new world.
It is a new world, and it's a new world for the Royals, and it's a new world for the media. We shouldn't lose sight, before I talk about the media, about in that same interview, that senior person from AFP mentioned the British monarchy in the same breath as the so-called axis of evil, which isn't a good look, is it, when he says that, or said that they previously killed pictures only from the North Korean and the Iranian news agency. I mean, for the media, you've got AFP there acknowledging that they've got major issues internally, that they validated a photo that they shouldn't have done. So clearly it shows that them and maybe others had a bar that was perhaps too low when it came to photos that came from this sort of source. I mean, Associated Press, as we know over the last few days, they have on their website that pictures must always tell the truth, and the content of a photo shot pictures shouldn't be altered by Photoshop or by any other means.
If they change the way they treat the royal family and deal with the royal family, is that a signal, do you think, for us more widely, and obviously particularly in this country, and indeed the BBC, to think again about how we do?
Well, I mean, I suppose it would be, I mean, the BBC, as you know, Justin, has made considerable focus on this issue of transparency. I mean, the BBC constantly talks about transparency being an essential element in ensuring audiences feel they can trust BBC journalism. So, I mean, one way the BBC could show that, I mean, the broadcasters have a royal cameraman. It's a person who is paid for by the BBC, Sky and ITV, and this would be an opportunity for the BBC to make clear to its audiences that the material that that individual provides for audiences is material that they control, that it's not edited by the palace, not controlled by the palace, and they can make clear that the sound that is picked up by that cameraman operating on behalf of the broadcasters isn't interfered with in any way as well. So, I mean, it is an opportunity for the broadcasters to follow the suit.
But a lot of royal coverage, though, is controlled by the royal family, isn't it? I mean, that's a simple fact. I just wonder whether you think there will be, or indeed whether there should be, a pulling back from that situation.
Well, I think it's what's known as a pull system, which is familiar to anyone who's worked in politics, the same as with royals. It was a system that Harry and Meghan particularly grew to dislike, but it's a system I think that both sides would say works, whereby one person, a cameraman or a reporter or a photographer, is there to cover an event for all of the people involved, and that works as long as the individuals, the broadcasters and all the media maintain editorial control of what is produced when they are filming or photographing or recording what is going on in front of them.
But is there always editorial control? Because, I mean, they used to issue their own videos, didn't they, thereof? Do they still do that? Are they still used by broadcasting?
Well, I remember when I worked for the BBC as the broadcast one, there was considerable concern about that, and I remember drafting an email in 2016, I think it was, expressing concern, which was that there was the Heads Together campaign. It was about focus on mental health, and they were producing videos that were from behind the scenes, and that's always very attractive to broadcasters and others, isn't it, when you have access behind the scenes. But at the BBC at the time, there was concern that we should have been filming that, not an outside agency, outside camera people, which is what was happening.
Peter Hunt, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
It is 16 minutes past 7. A controversial scheme incentivising home heating companies to install more heat pumps has been postponed until next April. Felicity Hanna has more details. Felicity.
Yes, this is the Clean Heat Market Mechanism, snappy title, designed to push heating manufacturers towards lower carbon options by fining them if they don't increase their proportion of heat pump sales. Now, as Simon says, it's been pushed back a year after quite a lot of feedback from the companies involved, who warned it could increase prices for all consumers. Charlotte Lee is CEO of the trade body, the Heat Pump Association. Charlotte, good morning.
Good morning, Fliss. Thank you for having me on today.
Thanks for joining us. Big manufacturers who are members of yours, like Vaillant, like Worcester Bosch, they've lobbied quite heavily against this scheme. They say the targets are unrealistic. Are they?
So, we are in a unique position as the HPA to represent both obligated and non-obligated parties in this. all of whom over recent years have invested collectively millions of pounds in gearing up the supply chain to support the anticipated acceleration of heat pump installations. And I think what's really clear across the board from all the members is in order to drive that, in order to drive the acceleration, we need clear, consistent policy, and that's what we're calling on the government today.
So what is it you want then? Are you concerned that perhaps this change today, this pushback until next April of this policy, is actually the government getting ready to scrap it?
Well, that's not what they've said, and I think that's a really important clarification to make here. So what they've noted is a delay and not a cancellation. And what that delay does, which arguably was inevitable due to the uncertainty over recent months and the timing issues relative to laying the required legislation. So it is a delay, not a scrapping. And the key here is for government to use this additional time to ensure that the mechanism functions properly. So it introduces functioning processes in a transparent manner to support the delay of the mechanism in a fair and accurate way. And that's what we're calling on the government to use this delay to do.
Okay, the delayed scheme is the stick. For householders, there's also a carrot, isn't there? There are grants worth up to £7,500 available. Today they've been made available to a wider number of households. Is that going to shift the dial? Is that going to change consumer demand?
So we've seen a really big increase in the interest in that grant scheme since it was increased from £5,000 to £7,500 back in September. And the announcement yesterday to remove the requirement to have pre-existing loft and cavity wall insulation in place prior to be able to access that grant is another step along the way of simplifying the process towards moving to the lowest carbon heat solution.
Are we on track then?
So we need to see a tenfold increase across the next 4 years in order to reach the 600,000 target that the government have reaffirmed on multiple occasions. And I think the big key here is, and the big policy enabler that we are calling for, is for the government to take meaningful action to rebalance the price of electricity relative to gas, as they've committed to do in line with the Skidmore review, but that will make the lowest carbon heat the lowest cost heat and further support this acceleration.
Charlotte Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fliss. 90 minutes past 7. When you travel around Somerset, where we are this morning, you are left under no doubt at all about how wet it is, how wet it has been. Lakes that may or may not be normally in place. Trains in some places seeming to cut through water on both sides of the tracks, standing water in fields, and an impact on farming that is clear and lasts even when the water has drained away. David Udall is from the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board, which has just done a survey of areas sown with crops around the UK. They found a very big reduction in the amount of crops being grown.
So our survey of crop planting areas this year is showing a 15% reduction in the wheat area to just over 1.46 million hectares. The reason that's an issue is because farmers are not able to produce and plant as much crop as they were expecting to, and therefore their incomes are going to be falling because they don't have as much crop. But also we're seeing the double effect that they're seeing high cost of production because of the high inflation that we've seen over the last couple of years flowing through their business. Longer term, this is something that we feel poses a risk because of the extremely volatile climate that we've seen recently in terms of the amount that we're going to be able to produce for ourselves. So it's a risk longer term to our self-sufficiency and therefore to our food security.
That was David Udall. Let's talk to Ian Graham, who's an arable farmer working between Glastonbury and Bridgewater on the Somerset levels, not far from where I am this morning, a member of the Somerset's NFU board as well. Mr. Graham, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a rather lovely morning at the moment, isn't it? But I think it is going to rain later on today, and my goodness, you've seen more than your fair share of it.
Yeah, we have. It's been rather a wet, challenging winter.
And what has it meant for you in terms of your ability to use the land?
Our crop planting's down probably 20%. A fifth of our acreage, which should have been planted to winter beans, hasn't been planted just because it's been so incredibly wet. So we're no longer planting those. We'll have to do something else with that. I've put it into SFI currently, the Sustainable Farming Incentive, to try and get some guaranteed output from it, really.
Right, so what does that actually involve for the land?
It is going into a herbal ley, so which is grass mix full of herbs with chicory and sainfoin and things, and we'll use that for our livestock. And that'll be 1/5 of our acreage, really, just so we've got some guarantee output from the ground, because with the winter it just wouldn't have worked with winter beans. They would have failed.
In proportionate terms, what's it meant for you financially?
It's difficult to quantify, but what it does mean is I've got a guaranteed maybe lower income, but at least I know where I am, so I can plan accordingly.
Yeah, we were in Wedmore, not far from you, yesterday, talking to a farmer there, and he was making the point that, and we were looking at all the water on his fields, and he was making the point that the worst thing now that could happen for him, I don't know whether you agree with this, is a hot, dry summer, which is sort of counterintuitive. But explain why that is.
The crop, I'm sat on the edge of our moor at the moment looking at a field of sheep and a field of wheat, and the field of wheat has probably got at least 10% bare area in it where the crop's completely failed, and there'd be another 20% of it which is looking stressed and unhappy. And it just, that stressed area, and even the area that's good, won't have any depth to its rooting, because the plants won't have A, needed to, or B, been able to root to depth over the winter. So if it now stops raining and goes hot, like it has done the past few years, the crops will, I don't think they'll fail, but their output will be massively reduced, because they won't be able to feed themselves. They won't be able to get to water. They won't have the ability to do that.
Yeah. Okay, it is a pretty grim picture. Let us see what the summer does bring. Thank you very much for taking the time this morning, Ian Graham, to talk to us. Ian Graham, who farms between Glastonbury and Bridgewater here in Somerset.
From soggy Somerset to Cheltenham, and Jonathan Ledyard with racing and sports news.
Morning. What a day at Cheltenham Festival yesterday for two of football's most charismatic football managers. Sir Alex Ferguson and Harry Redknapp both enjoyed their first winners at the festival as owners in more than 20 years of trying. Sir Alex did his back-to-back, and then in the very next race, the former West Ham and Tottenham boss Harry Redknapp with his horse Shake 'em Up Harry, one of our tips yesterday, won.
To have a winner at Cheltenham is my dream, you know, at the festival. That is special. Me and Alex, we're great pals, and had so many great days together in the football, and even watching the racing in his office at 2:15 before a 3 o'clock kick-off. And we've both had a great day today.
That was day 3, and it surely whetted our appetite for one of the great days on the British sporting calendar, the Cheltenham Gold Cup. John Hunt will once again be commentating for 5 Live and BBC Sounds, and he joins us now. Morning, John.
Morning to you, good morning.
Now, nothing against the Irish trainer Willie Mullins, who's setting new records and standards of excellence at Cheltenham, but those Ferguson-Redknapp results were just the tonic for British racegoers, weren't they?
I think so, yes. Mullins' winners have been greeted with a certain clinical element, but yesterday, there was a real lift to the whole occasion, and of course, celebrity owners always help, don't they? Especially football. Football, such a popular sport amongst racegoers as well. So yeah, people latched onto this very, very quickly. Ferguson's beaming smile. I saw Redknapp taking selfies with all sorts of people, including some of the medical staff at Cheltenham yesterday afternoon, and he clearly loves the game, Jonathan, as well. You could just hear that from the short little interview we heard there. So it was a special day for them both, and it really did help propel day 3.
A word about a rising star in the British training ranks. Dan Skelton, his brother Harry, rode Sir Alex's second winner yesterday, and now just 2 behind Mullins overall at the festival.
Yeah, he's had an amazing week, and to think that Dan Skelton used to be Paul Nicholls' assistant as well. He learned his trade well, didn't he? 4 winners already then this week, and that is a level of success that Skelton would not have dreamed of at the start of the week. Excellent trainer, one of our very best trainers. 2 handicap winners earlier in the week for him. But yesterday, the important thing, Jonathan, about his successes were that they came at the highest level, Group 1 level. So that's a clear indicator that Dan Skelton, son of Olympic gold medalist, of course, Nick, has clearly broken through to the highest levels of training in Great Britain.
And so to the Gold Cup, clear favourite is last year's winner, Galopin Des Champs, trained by Willie Mullins. Which of his 11 rivals then are going to upset the odds, or can hope to, should we say?
Well, I suppose the most obvious one against Galopin Des Champs is Fast or Slow. He's a horse who was beaten by Galopin Des Champs when they last met in Dublin back in February, but fast or slow has twice before beaten Galopin Des Champs, so I'm sure that Martin Brassil, who trains him, will be confident that he can get very, very close. Gordon Elliott won the Stayers Hurdle yesterday with Tiapu, and he has a really nice horse called Chéri Colombe in the lineup as well. So I suppose, looking at it in the cold light today, those two are the two most significant threats to last year's winner.
John Hunt, thank you very much indeed. Go well, save that voice, because 5 Live's coverage and BBC Sound starts from 1 o'clock. Just to say, Liverpool, West Ham had big wins last night, reaching the quarterfinals of the Europa League. Aston Villa did the same in the Europa Conference League. Rangers, though, have been knocked out, and Rory McIlroy is in a 3-way share of the lead on 7 under par after the first round of the Players' Championship at Sawgrass. Let's give you these 2 tips then for Cheltenham. 2:10, number 16, So Scottish, and then the Gold Cup, the Boodles Gold Cup. Number 9, 3:30, L'Homme Pressé.
Jonathan, thank you.
BBC Sounds. Hi, Namlanta Kombo here. My award-winning podcast, Dear Daughter, is back. To my dearest only daughter, be the brightest shining light. Celebrating women's voices.
You're very welcome to Now You're Asking with me, Marion Keys.
And me, Tara Flynn.
This is Juicy.
No limits, no limits, no limits. Celebrating women.
Where to Be a Woman is the podcast celebrating the best of women's well-being. We're on a quest to find out where in the world women are living their best lives.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
The weather, largely cloudy at first with showers for many. Bright spells may develop from the west later. It's coming your way, Justin.
Indeed it is. Coming up before 8 o'clock, we'll talk more about school meals, how they can be improved. We will hear from a former Education Secretary and an Academy CEO.
You're listening today on Radio 4 with Justin Webb in Taunton, Simon Jack in London, and Caroline Nichols has a summary of the news at 28 minutes past 7.
Voting has begun in Russia's presidential election, which is almost certain to extend Vladimir Putin's term by another 6 years. Ballots will be cast across 11 time zones, including in parts of Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, which are occupied or influenced by Russia. Voting will end on Sunday. The Kremlin is likely to use a victory for Mr. Putin to justify the war in Ukraine. Israel has turned down the latest terms for a ceasefire set out by Hamas, despite saying there had been positive developments in the talks. There's been growing international pressure for the two sides to reach an agreement involving the release of more of the hostages seized in the attacks on October the 7th. The office of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said Hamas continued to hold unrealistic demands. Officials in Gaza have accused Israeli forces of opening fire on crowds of Palestinians waiting for aid trucks in Gaza City. The Hamas-run health ministry said that at least 20 people had been killed and more than 150 injured. Israel denied opening fire on the crowd and said it was analysing the incident. The Conservatives are facing renewed questions about a wealthy donor who's been accused of making racist remarks about the MP Diane Abbott. The party refused to confirm or deny reports that Frank Hester had made further donations since the £10 million he gave last year. Researchers have found that death rates from drugs or suicide are higher in more deprived areas and in seaside towns. The study by the Health Equality North Group found alcohol use and having an unskilled job drove up the risk. The rates of deaths in England were highest in Blackpool, where they were 6 times the rate of the lowest area, Barnet, in North London. The communications watchdog Ofcom is warning that children are being exposed to violent online content while still in primary school, and that they see it as inevitable and unavoidable. The watchdog has commissioned a series of reports looking at how children find harmful content. It's urging social media companies to strengthen child protection ahead of new guidance being published this spring.
Caroline, thank you. 7:30 is the time. The Prime Minister has told us all pretty clearly there is not going to be an election on May the 2nd, but we know that there will be one, the most likely timing being the autumn, and we're concentrating for this programme on visiting some key constituencies around the nation. Visits we've begun already so that we can get a sense of what the issues are, and indeed if there are any surprises in store for any or all of the political parties from an electorate that seems, generally speaking, pretty hacked off. I've chosen Wells in Somerset. It's a Conservative seat targeted by the Liberal Democrats. This is the gentlest of scenes, the busker tootling away. There are a couple of fat-looking swans munching at what appears to be bits of grass. There are trees swaying in a gentle breeze and people swaying gently as well. Most of them as grey-haired as I am as they go from cafe to cafe alongside the wonderful Wells Cathedral, which dominates this whole tiny city. Dr. Hannah Bunting from the University of Exeter is standing next to me in these rather glorious circumstances. Dr. Bunting, let's talk first about who the voters of Wales are and what their concerns are.
Demographically, it is an older constituency. People who come here tend to stay
Try
here.
to open
so
it.
that means that, you know,
Is it open? I will stop here. So somebody was trying to get inside, huh? All right. It's gone. Thank you for saying me. I will stop here on this side. I could see the van. The small car, I have it here, but the van is at the back. I didn't see it. You turned that on that side. All right, thank you.
Which is good, you've brought him up well. From your perspective, what is it that really matters, Lucy, and matters to you and might sway your vote one way or the other?
I think for us it's about childcare. I'm self-employed and so is my husband, so we've been really lucky that we can be relatively flexible with childcare, but it's taken us 2 years to find a place for him to go to nursery.
2 years?
2 years, yeah. So most people now have to think about a nursery place when you've not even had the baby, which for a lot of people that could be quite nerve-wracking. It's just think, I haven't even had my baby yet, and I've now got to think about what my child's going to be doing in 2 years' time. And I think for people who haven't got parents nearby who can help with childcare, grandparents, how are you going to go back to work?
And do you get the impression, Flo, that things have actually got worse? That when we talk about resource and when you talk about the kind of help that you need, that actually there is genuinely less of it now than we used to?
Closed around the pandemic.
And that then goes into the much wider question of NHS funding and funding for public services more generally.
Yes, I mean, I'm a junior doctor.
What proportion of your income, roughly, do you have to spend then on the childcare that you get?
So currently, not working in hospital and not having the out of hours uplift, about a quarter of the salary goes on childcare, and that's for 2 days a week because we're lucky to have help from grandparents as well.
I'm back with Dr. Hannah Bunting.
It is very much a Liberal Democrat Conservative battleground, but it's also going to be fought on new boundaries, which is going to change things.
Change things how, do you think?
Well, around 45,000 of the voters who are currently here are going to stay in what will become the Wells and Mendip Hills constituency, and then others are being brought in. So the Rawlings and Thrasher notional results say that actually increases the Conservative majority here and means that the Liberal Democrats need a bigger swing to be able to win the seat. But if you look at places like Somerton and Frome, those by-elections, it's well within their reaches.
We've come 20 minutes outside Wells now to Cays.
Morning. My name is George. Going to Highland Village, and I think I've been open at the back. My door was open by somebody because I could see the car was stopping in my front, and I could avoid it. Sorry? No. So I didn't have any padlock. I was. Yes, I know. I know what it happened on 10:50. Yes, I know what it.